You can birth in the hospital and still follow your instincts, but only if you know how to push back when it matters. This is not about going rogue, it's about the ability to work with your care team without handing over the reins. I've seen hospital policy used to override instinct more times than I can even count, presented with confidence as if it's the law, when really it's just habit, routine, or preference. Welcome to Trust Your Birth Tuesday, where we cut through the noise, ditch the fear-based nonsense we're fed about birth, and actually get you feeling prepared and confident. I'm Coco. I'm a birth coach and doula and a mama of two. I will never forget this birth that I supported. She had prepared so intentionally. She knew that she wanted to push upright. We had practiced it together. Her body felt safer that way, and she was confident. But when it came time to push, a nurse looked her right in the eye and said, "You are not allowed to do that." Not, "We don't recommend it." Not, "Let's go through your options." Just straight up, "You can't." Now, the truth is, there was not an emergency. There was no law. There was no hospital protocol. That was the nurse's preference. Nothing more. But in that moment, after hours of labor, feeling exhausted, focused on getting her baby out, those words hit really hard and she almost gave in. Until I leaned in close and I said, "You're allowed to ask, you're allowed to choose." And she did. She pushed the way she had prepared and she brought her baby into the world her way. And that moment really stuck with me because it really wasn't about being difficult or rebellious. It was about remembering that just because something is presented as a rule doesn't mean it is one. And that's exactly why surface level birth prep isn't enough. You can read all of the blogs, you can listen to all of the birth stories, but in that moment, when a provider looks at you in the eye and says no, you need to know what's actually negotiable. You need to have practiced and had the words and the confidence to step up in that moment. And that is what makes the difference. And we're talking about this today, but we're only able to scratch the surface in this short video. But in the next few minutes, you are going to learn why hospital policies feel so hard and how to see through the pressure. You're going to learn 3 types of hospital rules that every pregnant woman should know. And if you stay to the end, you will know exactly what to say when something doesn't feel right, but you're not sure how to push back. Because this is not about fighting the system. It's about staying rooted in your voice in a system that doesn't always make that very easy. So let's talk about why this happens. Why can something that's just a suggestion or preference feel like a non-negotiable? It really comes down to authority. In birth, you are in a medical environment. You're in a vulnerable state and you're taught to trust your provider. So when someone in scrubs comes in and says, "This is what we need to do," or "You can't do that," you believe it. But it's not just what they say, it's how they say it. It's the tone, it's the timing, it's the pressure of being in the middle of labor, already unsure and overwhelmed. You're contracting, you're trying to stay focused, and suddenly someone with a clipboard comes in, and that statement now feels like a law, even if it's not. That is the psychology of authority. Your brain hears it and is automatically going to think this must be a rule. And unless you've been taught how to pause, how to question, how to clarify, it's really easy to nod along. But here's what I want you to know. In the hospital, there is a big difference between a real rule and just a routine. There's a difference between preference and protocol. And unless you understand how to spot those differences, it's way too easy to give in to the power without even realizing it. And unless you've trained for those moments, when the tone is firm and the timing is terrible, it's really easy to freeze. That is the gap that no one is talking about. You don't need more information. You need to practice real time, real language prep that holds your ground when the pressure's on. And that's why this next part is so important, because we're going to go into some of that. Let's break down how you can actually walk into your birth knowing what a rule is and how to respond, because not everything holds the same weight in the hospital. There's 3 types of rules you might hear during labor. 1, real laws. These are things that are legally mandated, like certain newborn screenings or safety protocols that vary state by state. Example, in some states, there are laws around eye ointments for newborn or hepatitis B vaccines right after birth. However, you still have rights and options, but there's usually just some legal framework behind these. These are rare during labor, but they do exist. So knowing your rights ahead of time really matters. Two, hospital protocols. These are standard policies and procedures that the hospital uses for safety, efficiency, or liability reasons. Example, everyone gets an IV, or you need continuous monitoring. But here's the key. Protocols are not laws, they're defaults. And most of the time, they're going to be negotiable. If you understand why the protocol exists, you can ask questions, you can make adjustments, or maybe you decline altogether, especially if your pregnancy is low risk. And this is a huge part of what we practice inside my Empower Method birth course, not just because I'm teaching you what to say, but we're actually walking through how to respond, what to expect, how to handle it in the moment, because that is a gap that most birth courses miss. They give you information, but the Empower Method actually trains you how to use it when it matters the most. Because you don't need to be combative. You just need to be informed and grounded enough to say, I understand the reason for that. Now, three, provider preferences. This is a big one and it's usually misunderstood. A provider might say, I don't allow pushing that position, or we don't go past 41 weeks, or you need to be on the monitor. But none of those are laws. They're not even hospitals' protocols. They are preferences. And the things that the provider personally feels more comfortable with. Listen, those preferences might be based on experience or caution, but that does not mean it automatically overrides your autonomy. If your provider's comfort level doesn't align with your plan, that is something to talk through ahead of time, not in the middle of labor. So what I want you to remember is just because something is said with confidence, it does not make it true. When you understand what type of rule you're hearing, you can respond from a place of clarity, not from fear. And when you're in the middle of labor, that clarity is everything. So many women walk into labor ready, and then the first unexpected suggestion hits. We're going to start Pitocin now. You can't eat anymore. You need to stay in bed. And then before they can even process what was said, they find themselves nodding along and saying, okay, not because they agree, not because that's what they want, but because the tone, the timing, the pressure, it makes them just feel like they have to. But the truth is that you always have time to pause. And in that pause, you can take your power back. So instead of saying, okay, when your brain is foggy and your body is working through intense contractions, let me give you two phrases that shift the entire dynamic without confrontation. One, can we pause for a moment? Simple, respectful, powerful. This one sentence gives your nervous system time to catch up. It creates space. And it reminds you and the rest of the room that you are still the decision maker. You do not need to defend anything. You just need a moment to reconnect with yourself before moving forward. And two, is there a medical reason we need to do this right now? This question shifts the energy fast. It gives clarity. It signals that you're engaged and you're informed. And it puts the responsibility back where it belongs, on the provider to explain why. Not every recommendation is urgent. Not every protocol applies to you. And if there is a reason to act quickly, you deserve to know it. What these phrases do are simple, but very powerful. They interrupt the pattern of passive agreement. They open the door to conversation, and they help you stay in that power without creating unnecessary tension. You do not need a script. You need the ability to pause, ask a question, and shift the energy in the room. These phrases might sound really simple, but the way you deliver them, that comes from preparation, from actually practicing the skill, not just reading about it. These are the kind of tools that I teach inside my Empower Method birth course. And we don't just talk about them. We practice them. We make sure your partner's on board. Because when the time comes, I want you to feel calm, clear, and confident, not scrambling for the right words. You don't need to be loud to be clear. You don't need to be confrontational to be powerful. You don't need to fight to lead your birth. You just need to be prepared, because the hospital birth runs on routine. And if you don't know how to spot the difference between routine and reality, you can get swept up into choices that don't actually reflect what you want. Today, we talked about how that happens. why hospital policies feel so final even when they're not, the 3 types of rules in the hospital and how to recognize how to respond to them, and the exact phrases that you can use to create space and hold your ground without conflict. We covered a lot today, but this is truly just the surface. Knowing how to question a rule is one thing, practicing it so it becomes natural in the moment, that's what actually is going to change your birth experience. And you don't want the first time that you try to be during labor, because in that moment, you're foggy, tired, you're unsure. You don't rise to the level of what you know, you fall to the level of what you practice. And that's what we do inside the Empower Method birth course. This is not just another birth class. It's the exact method that I've used with my high touch birth coaching clients, but now it's available for the first time as a self-paced course, because every woman deserves this kind of preparation, not just the ones that can afford a birth coach. You don't just get information. You're going to get strategies, tools, and real world practice so that you can respond, you can adapt, you can lead your birth with confidence and clarity, even in that hospital setting. So if you're tired of surface level prep and you want to actually feel ready to speak up, set boundaries, and stay grounded, join the waitlist now. This course is built for women who know that their voice matters and want to make sure it's heard. The link is below. Click on the button, enter your name to join the waitlist. The course is going to be opening up soon. And if you're on the waitlist, you'll get first access, exclusive bonuses, and everything that you need to prepare deeply and differently, because this is your birth. And no matter what room you walk into, your voice deserves to lead the way.